Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring more amazing stories like this straight to you. Thank you for your support. Now let us dive into today's story. It all started with a simple mistake. A small colony, far from Earth, built on the edge of explored space. A quiet place called Haven Reach. It was supposed to be peaceful, a new home for farmers, teachers, doctors, and families wanting a fresh start among the stars. They built greenhouses, schools, parks, and quiet streets where children could play under two suns. For a time, it was perfect. But peace rarely lasts in the deep parts of space. One day, a mining crew digging near the edge of the colony found something strange. A structure buried deep underground. Black stone, sharp angles, markings that seemed to shimmer when you looked at them too long. They thought it was just another ancient ruin, maybe leftovers from some forgotten race that had died out millions of years ago. They called for scientists. Teams arrived with scanners and robots. They poked and prodded, took samples, tried to open doors that did not want to be opened. Then, they found the artifact, a strange sphere, cold and heavy, humming softly like it had its own heartbeat. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. They brought it back to the colony, put it in the center of town, inside a lab. They studied it. They even displayed it during festivals, proud of their discovery. They had no idea what they were holding. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later. Communications with nearby outposts were lost. At first, people thought it was a storm, a glitch in the satellites. But then, small merchant ships started disappearing. Patrols sent to find them never returned. Fear began to grow. The colony leaders tried to stay calm. They told people it was just bad luck, that everything was fine. But deep down, everyone felt it. Something had changed. And then the sky broke open. A fleet appeared without warning. Ships like nothing humans had ever seen. Dark shapes that moved like living things. Their surfaces, rippling with shifting armor. Weapons that burned through space itself. They did not broadcast greetings. They did not send warnings. They attacked. In minutes, the colony's defenses were torn apart. The ground shook as buildings collapsed. Fires spread. Families fled into the hills, hiding wherever they could. The small garrison of human soldiers fought bravely but had no chance. The alien ships moved like wolves through a flock of sheep, hunting without mercy. In the center of the destruction, they came for the artifact. Small, fast ships landed near the lab. Creatures in dark armor poured out, moving with terrifying speed. They seized the sphere, guarding it like a treasure. Anyone who got in their way was cut down without hesitation. By the time reinforcements from Earth arrived, it was too late. The colony was gone. Only ruins remained. And from the wreckage, a single transmission was found. A message from the alien attackers sent across every known frequency. A simple statement, clear and cold. You have taken what is ours. You have declared war. Prepare for extinction. Humanity had just declared war on the deadliest species in the galaxy. Not by choice, not by anger, but by simple ignorance. And now, there was no way to take it back. At first, the leaders of Earth did not know what to do. They had fought wars before, against pirates, against small alien empires, against themselves, but this was different. The attackers, known only by an old name whispered in ancient ruins, the Cathar, were legends even to the oldest races in the galaxy. They were not conquerors, they were exterminators. When they found a threat, they destroyed it completely. Planets burned, stars dimmed, entire species vanished without a trace. They left nothing behind but silence. The Cathar had been sleeping for thousands of years, hidden in dark corners of the galaxy, forgotten by most. But now, humanity had woken them up, and they were coming. Panic spread. Some worlds tried to surrender immediately, sending messages of apology and offering gifts. But there was no answer. The Cathar did not accept surrender. Others tried to hide, shutting down communication, covering their cities in cloaking fields. But it did not matter. The Cathar found them. One by one, colonies fell. Earth had no choice. They called for unity. Every nation, Every company, every person was asked to stand together. Ships were built faster than ever before. New weapons were designed. Old grudges were buried under the simple truth that if humanity did not stand together, they would die alone. The first great battle took place near the Vega system. A massive human fleet, thousands of ships strong, faced a Cathar hunting group. It was a massacre. Human ships fought bravely, but their weapons barely scratched the enemy armor. Their tactics, designed for normal wars, failed against creatures that moved and thought faster than anything they had faced before. But in the ruins of defeat, humanity found its first hope. A small frigate, badly damaged, managed to capture a piece of Cathar technology, a shard of armor still humming with alien energy. Scientists tore it apart, studied it, learned its secrets. They discovered that the Cathar ships were alive in a way. Their armor was grown, not built. Their systems were biological, not mechanical. They could adapt to attacks, but they had weaknesses too. Certain frequencies disrupted their senses. Certain weapons could pierce their living shields. Armed with this knowledge, humanity changed. They built new weapons designed not to break metal, but to disrupt biology. They trained pilots to move faster, think faster. They learned to fight like hunters, not soldiers. The next battle was different. Humans used small, fast ships to dart around the massive Cathar vessels, striking at weak points, blinding sensors, cutting off limbs and weapons. Losses were still heavy. But for the first time, a Cathar ship fell. The news spread like wildfire. The Cathar could be hurt. They could be stopped. It would not be easy. It would cost everything. But there was a chance. Across Earth and its colonies, a new spirit rose. No longer fear, but fierce determination. Humanity had made a mistake, yes, but now they would finish what they started, not because they wanted war, but because they wanted to survive, to protect their homes, their families, their future. The Cathar sent bigger fleets, more terrible weapons. They unleashed horrors that could melt cities in seconds, beasts that devoured entire armies. But humans adapted faster than anyone had thought possible. Every loss taught them something new. Every defeat made them stronger. In secret labs, new technologies were born. Weapons that could tear apart Cathar ships at the molecular level. Shields that could block their energy blasts. Engines that could dance through gravity fields like leaves in the wind. Humanity became what the Cathar feared most. A prey that refused to die. A prey that learned. A prey that fought back. And slowly, one battle at a time, the balance began to shift. The first true human victory came not from the strongest fleet or the most advanced weapons, but from a small, almost forgotten mining colony called Bastion Point. Bastion Point had been marked for destruction by the Cathar. They sent a force of 100 living warships to wipe it clean. But the miners and engineers there refused to die quietly. They used every trick they knew. They overloaded reactors to create massive energy bursts that blinded enemy sensors. They built traps in space, clouds of debris and hidden mines that tore into the Cathar ships. They turned their mining lasers into weapons powerful enough to carve through armor. When the human fleet arrived days later, expecting to find ruins, they instead found the Cathar in retreat, bleeding and broken. Bastion Point became a symbol. A proof that humans could not only survive but fight back in ways no one expected. News of Bastion Point spread across every human world. It gave people hope. It showed that they were not helpless. Everywhere, ordinary people began to prepare for war. Factory workers learned to build weapons. Students learned first aid and survival skills. Artists painted murals of battles yet to come. Soldiers trained harder than ever before. Scientists worked without sleep. The spirit of humanity hardened into something the galaxy had rarely seen before. A species that refused to kneel. But the Yi? Cathar were not easily defeated. They adapted too. They changed their tactics. They began targeting planets not by attacking their defenses, but by corrupting their life itself. They released viruses that turned ecosystems into death traps. They spread machines that poisoned oceans and blackened skies. The goal was simple: to erase humanity's ability to live. to turn Earth and its colonies into lifeless stones. The attack on New Horizon was the worst. New Horizon was a beautiful world, filled with green valleys and bright rivers. In a single month, it turned into a wasteland. Forests burned. Animals died. Cities were abandoned. Millions lost their lives. Humanity watched in horror. They realized the Cathar did not just want to win. They wanted to break the spirit of every human being, to make them give up hope before death even arrived. But again, humanity refused. New Horizon survivors spread across the stars, carrying their stories with them. They showed the scars of what the Cathar had done, and they swore they would never let it happen again. They inspired others to fight harder, to protect what remained, to build stronger defenses, to strike back with everything they had. Human engineers developed a new kind of weapon, a living weapon, built from Cathar biological technology mixed with human science. It was a virus, but not one that killed life. It infected the living ships of the Cathar, turning their systems against them. Ships lost control, weapons failed, sensors went blind. Battles that once seemed impossible to win suddenly became victories. The Cathar began to fear humans in a way they had not feared anyone in thousands of years. Their fleets became more cautious, their attacks more careful. They began to retreat from some systems. Humanity, once hunted, became the hunter. One of the most important moments of the war came during the Battle of the Broken Belt, a region of space filled with shattered asteroids and drifting wreckage. A human fleet of only 50 ships trapped a Cathar invasion force of 300 warships. Using the dense field of rocks and debris, the humans launched a perfect ambush. They split the Cathar forces, isolated their command ships, and destroyed them one by one. The victory was so complete that for the first time in recorded history, a Cathar commander was captured alive. The prisoner was not what humans expected. It was not a monster or a mindless beast. It was intelligent, cold but not without reason. It spoke in images and feelings, explaining that the Cathar did not hate humanity. They saw them as a disease to be removed, a risk to be eliminated, before it grew too powerful. It was not personal, it was survival. But the Cathar had made one fatal mistake. They believed humans would break easily. They thought fear would silence them. They were wrong. Armed with new knowledge from the prisoner, humanity made a bold decision. They would no longer just defend. They would strike at the heart of the Cathar Empire. They would bring the fight to the enemy's home. The operation was named Dawnfall. It was the most ambitious plan in human history. Hundreds of ships gathered. Thousands of soldiers trained for months. New weapons were built. Weapons designed to pierce even the strongest Cathar defenses. The journey to the Cathar homeworld was long and dangerous. Along the way, fleets clashed in massive battles. Stars turned dark with the wreckage of ships. Entire worlds burned. But the human fleet pressed on, driven by a determination that could not be stopped. When they finally arrived, they found a world unlike anything they had seen. The Cathar homeworld was a massive living structure. It breathed. It pulsed with life. Its atmosphere was thick and toxic. Its oceans boiled with strange energies. It was a fortress and a weapon combined. The first attacks failed. Human weapons struggled against the living defenses. Fighters were swallowed by storms of acid and magnetic waves. Ships were dragged down by tendrils of living metal. But humanity had learned too much, come too far, sacrificed too deeply to turn back now. They unleashed their new virus weapon, spreading it across the atmosphere. It infected the living structures, confusing them, slowing their responses. They targeted energy centers, cutting power to defense systems. They sent teams of soldiers onto the surface, risking everything to plant explosive charges deep inside the core structures. The battle lasted for days. Every hour brought new losses. Ships exploded in orbit. Soldiers fell by the thousands. The Cathar fought with a desperation born of survival. But the humans fought with something stronger, with the memory of burned worlds, with the cries of, the lost, with the hope of every child who still looked up at the stars and dreamed of a future. In the end, it was not a great weapon or a brilliant tactic that ended the battle. It was simple courage. A team of engineers, surrounded on all sides, managed to trigger a chain reaction deep within the core of the living world. The explosions ripped through the structures. The sky above the planet cracked with energy. The Cathar defenses collapsed. Their fleets broke apart. Humanity had done the impossible. They had struck down a species that had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years. The cost was terrible. More than half the human fleet was lost. Millions of lives were gone. Entire colonies mourned the dead. But they had survived. They had won. And in the silence that followed, the galaxy listened. Species that had once hidden now came forward. Races that had given up hope now looked to humanity as a symbol that even the darkest threats could be defeated. That courage, unity, and stubborn hope were stronger than fear. Humanity did not seek to rule the galaxy. They did not demand tribute or build empires. They rebuilt. They healed. They helped others stand on their own feet. They showed the galaxy that strength was not in conquest but in resilience. The memory of the war stayed with them. Monuments were built, stories were told. Children learned the names of every world saved and every hero lost. And somewhere, beyond, the stars, the last remnants of the Cathar, watched and remembered. They would not forget the prey that had fought back, the prey that had become the hunters. The galaxy was forever changed, but humanity, scarred yet stronger, was ready for whatever the future would bring. Because once you declare war on humanity, you never fight just soldiers. You fight every dreamer, every builder, every stubborn soul who refuses to give up. And in the end, it is not the strongest who win. It is those who never surrender. The years after the war were not easy. Victory had come at a great cost, and the wounds left behind were deep. Many colonies were still rebuilding. Families had lost loved ones. Entire cities had been wiped from maps. The stars that once felt full of promise now carried memories of blood and fire. But humanity did not break. Instead, they worked harder. They rebuilt faster. They grew stronger. The spirit that had carried them through the darkest days of the war now burned even brighter. On Earth, a new council was formed. Not a government of rulers, but a council of voices from every world, every colony, every station that had survived the war. Their goal was simple. Never again would humanity stand alone. Never again would they wait until the last moment to fight. They would be ready. They would be united. And they would protect not just themselves, but anyone in the galaxy who asked for help. At the same time, something even greater began to happen. Other species who had hidden in fear during the reign of the Cathar began to step forward. Some of them had been slaves. Some had been hunted. Some had been waiting for a miracle they thought would never come. Now, seeing what humanity had done, they found new courage. They asked for alliances, for trade, for friendship, for protection. Humanity welcomed them, not as subjects but as partners. They shared technology. They shared knowledge. They even shared the hard lessons they had learned about the cost of waiting too long, about the price of freedom. Slowly, carefully, a new network began to grow. A network not built on fear or control, but on trust. But not everyone was happy with this new future. There were still those who hated humanity for what they had done. Remnants of old powers that had once profited from the terror of the Cathar. Rogue warlords who refused to accept peace. Hidden empires that saw humanity as a threat to their own ambitions. And so, even after the Great War, battles still flared across the stars, some small, some devastating. But humanity had learned. They were no longer the naive explorers they had once been. They fought smart. They fought with honor. And most importantly, they fought together. One of the greatest challenges came when a new threat emerged from the edge of known space, a race calling themselves the Varun. They were not like the Cathar. They were not destroyers. They were conquerors. They believed they were destined to rule all life. They sent envoys wrapped in gold and silver, offering peace, but demanding Obedience. The Council of Humanity listened carefully. They debated. They studied the history of the Varun, the trails of broken promises and crushed worlds they had left behind. And then, calmly and clearly, humanity answered. No. The Varun did not take rejection well. They launched fleets, powerful and swift. They expected an easy victory, just as the Cathar had once expected. But they found a galaxy ready and waiting. Human ships fast and deadly, joined by fleets of former slaves, former enemies, now allies. Together they met the Varun in battle after battle, pushing them back, breaking their pride. The war with the Varun was shorter than the war with the Cathar. It was brutal. But it was clear from the beginning that humanity and their allies were stronger, more determined and more united. In the final battle near the dying star of Gorus, the Varun leadership surrendered. Not because they had lost all their ships, but because they had lost the will to fight a people who refused to be broken. This second great victory sealed humanity's place among the stars. Not as tyrants, not as kings, but as defenders, as builders, as a species that would rather share hope than spread fear. Earth, once a small blue planet in a forgotten arm of the galaxy, became a symbol of resistance and survival. Its people who had once feared the night sky now traveled freely among the stars. New colonies were founded, built not with walls and weapons first, but with open arms and open minds. New alliances were formed, stronger and deeper than any ever seen before. The ruins of the Cathar homeworld were left untouched, a silent warning to all who might think about walking the path of destruction again. The battlefield of Gorus was turned into a memorial, where ships and flags of every allied race floated in the vacuum, honoring the lives lost to protect a future of freedom. But even as peace grew, humanity remembered one important truth. Peace was not something given, it was something earned, something protected. Every day and every small action, from the training of a pilot to the building of a new school on a distant moon, humanity worked to make sure they would never be caught, sleeping again. Children grew up learning about the wars not with hate but with pride. They learned that mistakes had been made, yes, but that courage had overcome fear, that unity had overcome destruction, that hope had overcome darkness. New explorers set out into uncharted space carrying not weapons of war but seeds of life. They found worlds untouched and helped them grow. They found broken places and helped them heal. They found lonely species and offered friendship. In the council chambers, leaders debated not how to prepare for the next war, but how to prevent it. How to build stronger bonds between peoples who had once been strangers. How to make sure that the sacrifices of the past were never forgotten but used to build a better future. Still, some nights old veterans would sit under the stars remembering the screams of the fallen, the burning skies, the endless nights when hope seemed lost. They remembered not to mourn, but to honor, to remind themselves why they fought, why they endured, why they would always stand ready, if ever. The darkness returned, because in the end humanity had learned one final lesson. Power does not come from strength alone, it comes from the heart, from the refusal to give up, from the simple, stubborn belief that tomorrow can be better than today. And so, humanity continued forward, not perfect, not without scars, but stronger, wiser, and unbreakable. Across the galaxy, the story of humanity was told and retold, not as conquerors, not as destroyers, but as the species that stood before extinction itself and said no. Congratulations, they said to themselves. You just declared war on the galaxy's deadliest species. And humanity smiled, because they knew exactly who they were now, and they were ready for whatever came next.